Hi. Read some kind of ecstatic, mystic Sufi poetry. It really inspires me. And two people in specific, Hafez and Rumi, they were both alive around 1200, 1300s in Turkey or in Iran. And it kind of hits on two things. One, I had an inspiration to go to these places as kind of a quest and to seek what their lives were about, just as a spiritual kind of inspirational thing that came to me. Not knowing specifics, but knowing that I was drawn to going there almost on a quest-like trip.
What was it about what you read that lit you up in that way? Can you remember? What stirred within you?
For me, in general, they're basically what you call divine union with God. They're ecstatic, joyful, blissful state. And in a big way, I realize there's nothing else I would like than that. And in a way, I wonder, is there anything else that we're here for except that?
Well, it's what we teach. That's what that allowing is. It's that alignment with that. And there are a lot of other things other than that here. But if you tend to that first, then all of the other things just feel better. All of the other things are more meaningful. So we would say it is most important to tend to that first. But we want to say to you, you couldn't possibly go to where they came from and dig up enough information about them to understand what their life was like and what contrasting experiences catapulted their desire into their connection. But your own life experience will do the exact thing for you. In other words, you're living a life as compelling and as important as theirs. You're just not knowing the details that caused them to seek, you see. But the details of somebody else's life in another place in another time are not meant to be the inspiration for your seeking. The details of your life, in other words, something like going to work, something like interacting with people who don't know, something like beating the drum of something that isn't satisfying. In other words, it's your own path that stimulates the desire to connection. And we're not trying to discourage you from going there because we love that you connected with the idea of connection. We love that you were inspired with the idea of inspiration. In other words, all of that is wonderful, but you don't have to look outside of your own life for the most satisfying of connections. What happens sometimes is someone like you decides to call your life less important and a life like that more important. But think about the vibrational message that you're sending to yourself. And what we want to do is help you to turn that around to understand that there has never been a life more important than the life that you are living. And that the connection that you will seek in the life that you are living will yield to you everything that one of those famous lives was yielding to them. Sometimes when you feel powerful impulse about someone, it's because you come forth from the same vibrational lineage. And it's not unusual at all for powerful teachers to show up again and again and again, and then to resonate with what they wrote when they were there before. And that certainly is the case. But you didn't come back to regurgitate that life. You came back to live this one.
It's the only other thing. I guess I should be content, but I have another thing. They lived their lives the way they lived them, and so will we. And what's just intrigued me is the fact that these folks had gurus who were, quote, enlightened, who they studied with, who brought them to enlightenment or helped them seek their enlightenment. But I was just wondering, with these gurus who people seek and who are just nothing but unconditional love, can you shed any light on how they reached that place? And can you shed any truth on it that might help me?
Well, everyone reaches everything by having experiences that make them want it, and then by aligning with that which they want. In other words, enlightenment is alignment with who you are. Enlightenment is offering a pure thought rather than a thought that contradicts another thought. In other words, when you want something that you do not believe, there is contradiction going on that keeps you from having the pureness of the experience. And so when you realize that whether you're talking about Jesus or Buddha, or there have been thousands of recognizable names of those who have been given the label of enlightenment, that one thing that was always common is their own life experience caused powerful desire to be born that at first they were not a vibrational match to. And then over time, they were able to bring themselves into vibrational alignment with their desire. And the reason that there are so many different philosophies and so many different religions and so many different methods that are taught about how to achieve that enlightenment is because there's not one path. In other words, there's not only one right way, but it does require wanting and then finding your personal guidance to assist you in doing it. So you hear remnants of what Jesus said. You get such a distorted dialogue about it. And as you ask us for the truth, we can tell you that you have access to the same information now, and you can talk to the energy that is Christ consciousness now. In other words, it would be much easier for you to get the heart of that truth than to dig up the relics that have been written and rewritten to serve those who have rewritten them through time, you see. But one thing that all of the enlightened ones have in common is that they eventually, sooner or later, discover that they must follow their own path of guidance. And without exception, they have to care little or not at all what those outside of them are saying about it. In other words, they don't let someone else set rules that then they try to follow. They follow their own path. You cannot find your path to your vibrational enlightenment by taking someone else's map, because you are the one through trial and error that has launched the desire to begin with. Now we're really onto something here. We want to, if you will allow us, we want to move forward into it, because we want you to understand that you and everyone else, but you are the creator of your own experience. And the way you create your experience is by having experiences that cause natural preferences to be born within you. When you were in the 6th grade and you had your thoughts somewhere other than where the teacher wanted them, and the teacher decided that you were wrong enough that it was important that your hands be slapped with the ruler and that you be punished and admonished publicly, and the reason that felt so awful to you is because that person was casting judgment and concluding the inappropriateness of not only your behavior but of your very being, and that went so cross-current to Source and how Source feels about you that it introduced enormous static or contradiction to your vibration, you see. Your own guidance system was saying, listen not to this foolish one who has forgotten who you are, or maybe never knew who you are. And so, had you known then what you know now, had you just been to a seminar with an enlightened Abraham, you might have said to yourself as you sat there, this isn't personal, this isn't about me, this is what this teacher has learned that should be done, and I will not be dissuaded from my sense of well-being as a result of this indiscretion, and nor will I hold it against this person because they know not what they do. Instead, I will maintain my vibrational alignment with my own sense of worthiness, and I will live happily ever after no matter what anybody else is thinking about it. Jerry and Esther received a call from Tracy, their daughter, the other day, saying that Kate, who's 2.5, was going to go to her first day of preschool. And when Esther heard that, it was like having the wind knocked out of her, because she sees this little girl as this pure, positive energy who only knows well-being. And to Esther, it felt like the beginning of the instruction to try to remind her that she's not good. And Esther was hoping that she could become 20 or 30 before any of that influence touched her in any way, you see. And so all of you are born with this powerful guidance that lets you know the perfection of that which you are. And if you can just remember that negative emotion means you're deviating from that knowledge and positive emotion means you're staying on the track, then you're able to continue to guide yourself. So the truth is there's not one path. The truth is there's not only one right path. The truth is all paths can be made to be the right path. The truth is that every individual has a different path. And the truth is that that different path that every individual is launching incrementally and amending constantly, that true path is known by Source and is guided by Source if you will pay attention to the way you feel.
That's a good agreement. It's a pretty good deal.
Best of agreements.
Yes.
Don't take it all so seriously. When you came into this life experience, you didn't say, I'll come forth to fix the world because you knew it wasn't broken. You didn't say, I'll come forth to undo my unworthiness because you knew there wasn't any of that. You didn't say, I'll straighten them out and help the wrong ones understand the error of their ways because you understood that there are many paths, you see. It was like the way you feel when you go on a vacation now. You don't tell your friends, I have this long list of accomplishments that I will do on my vacation as I make the world a better place as I go. You go on vacation for entertainment. You go for upliftment. You go for the fun of it. You go that you might be stimulated to something that might make you feel good. And that's exactly the same attitude with which you came forth into this body. You already knew you were good. You weren't trying to get it done. Someone gave Jerry and Esther a book the other day, and it was written in the 1930s. And the author was talking about how busy these times were and how hard it was to stay up with all of this modern day stuff. Esther nearly drove the motor coach off the road. She could not believe it. She had just been trying to get her computers tweaked into place. They'd had computer situations in the office trying to keep the software and the hardware all upgraded evenly. The satellite dish hadn't been working as they were parked under the trees, and they'd moved the coach 3 times that day trying to download email. In other words, Esther talks about being on the bleeding edge, and here's some foolish woman in 1930 thinking she was there and struggling to keep up with it. And then we explained to Esther, whatever the now is always the leading edge, you see. And it will always continue to unfold for you. You never get it done. And that was the thing that this interaction with this book did for Esther that was extremely meaningful. She thought, I'll bet that woman in 1930 was working hard all day, every day, trying to get it done in 1930. And do you know how much wasn't done by 1930 or 1931? In other words, and made Esther realize, what's she scrambling about now? What's she trying to get done? In other words, because she realizes that 20 years from now and 30 years from now and 100 years from now and 1,000 years from now, there will be the new leading edge environment still standing in the powerful now, still evolving and becoming more. And what is the big race about? When you are an eternal being, what is the rush? What are you rushing toward? Completion? Endedness? Never, you say. There isn't anything you're supposed to get done, and that your now is here to give you the joy of stimulation, the joy of satisfaction, the joy of creation, the joy of accomplishment, yes, but not for the purpose of getting it done, for the purpose of the satisfaction of the interaction in the now, you say. So when people say, what are you doing? You say, things that please me, and they say, toward what end? And you say, pleasure. And they say, but really, what are you working on? And you say, having a good time. And they say, but what do you hope to accomplish? And you say, living happily ever after. And they say, but what do you want to leave as your legacy? And you say, I was a happy one. And they say, but what is the mark that you want to leave? Life is joyous. But what is the value that you see in contributing to this time-space reality? I'm joyful. But what do you hope to accomplish? Being happy? It's hard for people to wrap their thoughts around that, and yet that's what all of existence is about, you see. Well-being abounds, and you can be as happy as you decide to be or as miserable as you decide to be. But don't be miserable for altruistic reasons.
Good. Thank you.
Yes, indeed.